This is important stuff
for you to know.
Welcome to the show. This is Tony.
And this is Javier.
This is the show where we talk about what we believe may be important stuff.
But in the end, it's for you to decide.
Welcome to the show, everybody. Javier, today I'd like to pick up on a topic that's all over the news. Geopolitical discussion on what's happening in the Middle East, specifically with Syria. Why is it happening? I don't know that we so much want to give our opinions on what's right and what's wrong, but let's assume that you are in the mix of this debate in Congress. It's in town halls all over the U.S., in homes. There are a lot of people affected by this. And you have to look at the situation, analyze it, and then advise and come to a decision. Which direction is the right path to go? I don't know which is the right path, but I thought maybe we could bring a little perspective to what the actual situation is that can help to have an understanding of a decision or not. So I'm going to throw it into your lap. If you are one of the debaters, you're in Congress, you're in the House, you're responsible to analyze this and give advice. Yes, no. Where do we go?
Well, first of all, I think it's a very important topic. So
Sure.
it's perfect for our show.
Yes.
Because we believe it's important stuff.
It certainly is.
And not only we do, you know that everywhere in the U.S., even now, you have communities, people are meeting at town halls, and getting together to see, what the representatives in Congress should do about this intervention of the U.S. in the conflict. Now, you're actually asking me to do some role-playing if I was involved in a discussion in Congress or in the White House or whatever. And I say that I see that there are like three different issues right now on the table. One is a political issue that related exclusively to the U.S. only.
Yes.
Whether it's Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, or Russia, or whatever, it has a local political implication, obviously. Whatever the president decides to do will be analyzed by politicians, by pundits, by the opposition party, and so on, only on a local political basis.
So first, it's U.S. politics.
Exactly, internal. Second, it's a geopolitical strategy. The position of the U.S. in world politics. What role should we play in world politics? Okay, and then the third implication is that from the military strategy point of view, militarily, what should the U.S. do to secure its sovereignty and the safety of its citizens? So, depending on if I am an advisor from which of these three issues am I the expert? Now, let's make it clear to the people and to you. I'm not an expert on the Middle East or the region.
Neither one of us.
I'm just a regular citizen who is concerned about what is happening and what implications this possible intervention would have in our lives.
Yes.
Okay.
We want to look at the perspectives here so that maybe we can help some people understand some situations that they didn't before, give them more information, bring it into the conversation so they can make up their own mind or participate in the conversation with a more informed presence. Why don't we start right here to try to understand a little bit about the history of the area, the geopolitical situation, the religion. What is the problem here in Syria? Do we clearly understand it? Let's address that first.
Well, I think there are two issues that people should be aware of. Number one, that it is a religious conflict. Fundamentally, it's a religious conflict. If you look at the map of Syria, most of the country is populated by the Sunnis. That's the majority of the people in Syria
Mm-hmm.
are from the Muslim Sunni religious group. The rest of the country, it's Shiite, which is a minority, and some other even smaller minorities. Now, what is going on now is that it is the Shiites who are running the country. And within the Shiites, there's a very small group, the Alawites, of which Assad, the president, belongs to. So you have a minority who is running a very large population of people from another religion. So there's a lot of religious tension historically.
So is the problem that he's trying to eliminate the whole Sunni population in the country? Is that the problem? But haven't they lived for many, many years?
Well, I don't think the issue is it's a physical elimination. Now, what we have seen historically since even from the days of his father, when his father took over after a military regime, is that they want to remove them from the economic benefits of the country. They have a small group of people who are reaping all the benefits of running the government of Syria, and they're leaving everybody else outside. So it's a economic. It has an economic implication, but fundamentally it's a religious conflict between the Sunnis and the Shiites, the Sunnis and the Shiites. This is one of the issues. Now, the other issue is that if you look at the map of Syria, the territory of Syria was drawn by the West after the First World War. They just took the map of the peninsula of the Middle East and they drew the lines where the border should be. And the French had a lot of influence on the decision because eventually they were assigned the responsibility of running the country for 26 years.
They didn't take any consideration to divide it where the groups of Sunnis and Shiites naturally inhabited the areas that divided? They just arbitrarily drew a boundary?
Well, that's the way it looks like. Like I said, I'm not an expert on the Middle East, but it looks that way, that they didn't take that into account, because you have these two religious factions living in the same country, and the numbers are so different that it could develop in a very tense relationship. And this is what we see now. Mm-hmm. We have a majority who says enough is enough. We want to run our country because we're the majority, and you have a minority clinging into power and doing anything they can to prevent the majority of taking over.
So, is the problem within Syria? Factions within Syria, motivated by religious differences, are causing this civil dispute, or are there other factors that are contributing to this?
Well, if you look at the news and who is giving opinions on this conflict, you can see that there are many puppeteers, there are many countries, there are many powers, there are many influencers getting their hands into this conflict. There are many dogs in this dogfight.
Yeah.
Okay, and this is what is happening. You see the Russians involved, you see Iran involved, you see France involved, you see Great Britain involved. Obviously, Israel, which is a neighboring state. You have Lebanon, you have Turkey, and you have the rest of the Arab world also watching what is happening there. So this is like a board game. And with many players, and unfortunately the people in Syria are the pawns that are being moved and managed left and right.
Who's controlling this game? Where is the source? Is there a possible source? What's the perspective here? It can't just be arbitrarily going on a game. There has to be a power source. There are a lot of players, you're saying, in this geopolitical.
No, there are a lot of players and a lot of puppeteers. There are a lot of people trying to run the country, influence on the decision making. You have, for example, Iran, which is a Shiite majority. 90% of the population in Iran is Muslim Shiite, which is the religion of Assad and his cronies, his group. against the Sunni majority, which is the opposition, the rebels who are fighting for independence. You have economic interests, of course, you have geopolitical interests, so everybody has a stake in Syria, or they think that they have a stake, and like everything is playing in this board game that Syria might be the excuse of something to happen. Even last night, I was shocked. I was watching the news, and somebody was talking that this could be the beginning of even a war starting in space, with satellites who are sending signals, for intelligence and so on, that somebody could shoot down a satellite from another country, and this could start a huge confrontation, a global confrontation, maybe a war that we have no idea where it's going to end. Mm-hmm. So, and this is happening in a country of 26 million people, because everybody is involved in it. There are too many dogs in this fight. And this is the concern that many people have in the U.S. is, do we really have a dog in the fight? Is our dog a Doberman, or do we have a Chihuahua?
Well, Russia has an economic interest. They supply a lot of the armament. Mm-hmm. They do a lot of the trading. I think they're the largest supporter of economics in Syria. Where does Iran play into this?
Well, Iran has there's something that is very important. Iran, number one, it's a religious implications of being Shiite and trying to help a fellow Shiite. Okay, even though he's Alawite, but he's Shiite. And then you have this obsession that Iran has on destroying Israel. Mm-hmm. You have Lebanon, you have Hezbollah and Hamas. So they see that Iran is in a win-win situation, because even if the U.S. has its hands in overthrowing Assad, getting Assad out of the country, who is going to replace him, I don't think will be people that are friendly to the U.S., because you have the Muslim Brotherhood, you have Hamas, you have Hezbollah, you have Al-Qaeda, and Iran also, because it's going to benefit, even though they are Shiites and these are Sunnis. At the end of the day, they're Muslims, and Iran knows how to move its influence around, that it can reap benefits from overthrowing Assad. If Assad stays, of course, Iran again is winning, and if U.S. intervenes, I think Iran is going to have a win-win situation, and the U.S. could be in a lose-lose situation.
Mm. Okay.
Because I don't see how we can benefit. How can the U.S. benefit of intervening in this conflict, where I really don't see how it can really get a benefit. How it can benefit from intervening when it's so complicated.
So complicated. This is probably a good place to pause. So we brought a little bit of the religious perspective into understanding the area. Who are the players involved? What are the problems and the effects that they are motivated by? In the next segment, I think we should take up what you started. What are the implications for the U.S.? Understanding the scenario, the geopolitical situation. What are the decisions and the effects of those decisions facing the U.S.? Get involved, don't get involved. Short period of time, long period of time. Do it alone. Get a coalition. There are probably a lot of questions. Why don't we pick this up on the other side of the break? Talk about the U.S.
Okay.
Welcome back, everybody. Okay, Javier, we talked a little bit about the historical perspective of the region in the Middle East, Syria, some of the religious aspects of the situation, some of the players that are involved. I think now we need to take it to a very important player, the United States. What are the decisions that the United States needs to make here before they make a decision to move or not move? What do they have to consider? What do you think is the most critical to consider?
Well, number one, as I mentioned at the introduction, we have a local political implication. Mm-hmm. What happens to the Obama White House, depending on the decision that the president makes of what are the next steps that the U.S. is going to take. One is it's a global influence. What happens to the global influence of the U.S.? And then we have the military repercussions. Now, the military, according to the military people that I have heard saying that the intervention doesn't have to be immediate. There's no way that they can remove the evidence whether they use the chemical
Sarin
weapons.
gases,
Yeah,
the chemicals?
they say the footprint is there for a long time. So it doesn't matter, even if they move the equipment, which they say they're not going to be able to move. By the way, one of the alternatives would be to strike not only on the sites where they use the chemical weapons or where they build these weapons. They say they could destroy military installations. Now, people say, well, but we are giving them time to move those installations and hide them. The issue is that they're fighting the rebels, and that's why they have the installations. If they remove them, they're going to lose their power to control them. So there's no way that they can remove the installations and put them in another place to protect them from a U.S. attack. So from the military strategy, it doesn't matter if the decision is made today or next week. This is what...
According to the military.
According to the military
yeah.
experts, okay?
Yes.
Now, remember, again, I'm not an expert on the military issues either. Now, from a geopolitical point of view, which I think it's central here, is the world, it has expected the U.S. to be like the global policeman.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, on everything that happens. And they always, when something happens in any corner of the world, everybody looks at the U.S. to see what is its reaction going to be, and the expectation that they have that the U.S. will be like the captain of the team, making the decision on what to do next.
Yeah. Why is that, though? And we seem to take all the time the brunt of the arguments. What is the U.S. doing? Why are they doing that? They're an imperialist. If we move, we get criticized. If we don't move, there's an effect. Why is this suddenly cast upon the U.S.?
Well, you say something that I think that some people don't really realize this, because they keep talking about imperialism. The U.S. is the least imperial nation in the world. And if you look at the history of the U.S. has fought in many foreign lands. Where has it stayed? Did it stay in Asia? Did it take Japan?
Yeah, no.
Huh?
The U.S. has no property.
Did it? Yes. People say that the only real estate that U.S. has after the war is the cemeteries, where
in northern
American
France.
troops. Yes. Okay. So this discussion that many people use, so this argument about imperialism, I think it doesn't fly. It shouldn't be fly anymore, and people should realize that this is a fact. It is not the intention of the U.S. to keep the territory that it conquered. I would hate to use the word conquer, in which it has intervened.
Is it involved?
It's involved. Like it has no intention to stay in Afghanistan. It has no intention to stay in Iraq, and certainly has no intention to stay in Syria. Mm-hmm. Now, what happens is that because the U.S. is the superpower, it's the only one really left. Well, maybe China now, but there are some questions about even if China is a superpower. Maybe economic, we don't know about military, but the U.S. is certainly the number one. Now, they expect the U.S. to take the baton, to take the leadership and decide this is what has to be done. Now, we forget that we have the United Nations. Mm-hmm. This supposedly is the role of the UN. And the UN is what it looks like it's washing its hands on Syria. I thought it was the
purpose of their organization.
And everybody's turning their head towards America and see what the U.S. is going to do. So they are really unloading a very large responsibility on the U.S. And like we have said before, does the U.S. really have a dog in this dogfight? I don't know. I don't really know. Now, one thing is, of course, the U.S. has getting back into the geopolitical consequences. It has its great ally, Israel, that whether it wants it or not, it's involved. Yeah. Because it has borders with Syria.
Jordan, Turkey, they're allies.
Oh, yes.
They're allies. But where is the Muslim group? What is it called? The Arab League combination. Where is their role in this? I haven't heard anything about the Arab League.
They are the ones who should intervene and try to find an amicable solution to this conflict between their Muslim brothers, the Muslim friends, Muslim allies. Right. The Sunnis the Sunni rebels and the Shiite government. But we don't see that happening. The only country, even though, well, it's not Arab, it's Muslim, it's Iran, that has a lot of stakes in this game. And this is the one that it's really the voice in the Middle East, that it's really sending mixed signals about what it would do in case there was an attack.
So are we actually, as we are debating a strategy for Syria to go or not to go, are we actually behind the scene debating our role in regard to Iran?
Well, I'm sure there are. I mean, this is a question that has been always on the table every time that there is some turmoil somewhere in the world, that people expect the U.S. to intervene. I'm sure that they are saying, why should we? And what happens if we do not intervene? What will happen to our image worldwide? I mean, are we really the big defender of democracy, or we're just turning our heads away, seeing this genocide that could really happen in Syria?
Mm-hmm.
Because we're only looking at the 1,000 people, 1,200 people who died because of a chemical weapons attack. But there are a lot more people have died already.
100,000. Over 100,000.
So is it chemical? So why is the chemical weapons the issue here? The reason why it's an issue, it's because of the UN. Yeah. The UN has abandoned chemical weapons. So it's a decision of the UN, but they want the US to enforce it. Why doesn't the UN, the blue helmets, why does the UN forces intervene in Syria? Why does it have to be the US? And then when the U.S. does it, everybody goes against the country.
This is the question. Let's analyze a little bit, if we can, or put some perspective, maybe just our opinions. If we do not go and get involved directly with Syria, what do we see as some implications of that decision?
Well, number one, you show weakness. You show that you are not. How would you say? They cannot depend on you to police
but weakness
violations.
To who? Weakness to who? We're
the
the
world.
only player.
Everybody's looking at you. I mean, everybody's looking at you. Every country in the world normally sees what is the U.S. going to do. What happened in Cuba? What happened in Grenada? What happens everywhere? Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam. I mean, you name it. Anything happens anywhere in the world. And they see Somalia. We saw Somalia. We saw in Rwanda. What happened with Rwanda?
Yeah.
They didn't intervene, and now people say, well, we should have, in Darfur also. So every time something happens in the world, people say, we have to see what the U.S. is going to do. And some people, they start using their influence in supra organizations, like the U.S., to see how they can, like the UN, to see how they can influence the U.S. to do something.
Okay.
And here I am afraid that the U.S., like I said before, it's in a lose-lose situation.
So if we don't go, we show weakness. Okay. What are the implications of that? Do we lose trade? Does the oil stop flowing in the Middle East? Do we have more aggressive action and activity throughout the Middle East towards our allies? I think Israel has made it very clear. Doesn't matter what the U.S. does, Israel will protect Israel. And they're quite capable of doing it. So if we don't go.
They just had some military exercise, I think it was yesterday, in the
Mediterranean.
So they're saying, listen, don't mess around with us, We're ready, which I think they are. Now, what happened, I think, and the question is, what happens to the U.S. if the U.S. doesn't intervene? Well, I think it like I said, it's going to show weakness. It would be a signal to many people to say, then they cannot bully us anymore. Actually, we can do things that will go against U.S. interests, and they're not going to intervene. So that could be one. I mean,
so we have a combined expansion of Sunni and Shiite together moving.
Everybody else. It could be even in Latin America. I mean, people say, well, U.S., this is happening in Syria. The U.S. threatened to intervene, and at the end, it fell to the pressure of the other major players. So if we do something in any country, let's say in South America, they're not going to intervene. So the U.S. it's using its hegemony, It is not, the powerhouse that it used to be. It is not a true defender of democracy, because we see that in Syria we have dictatorship and they're not intervening. So I think it's an image issue.
Yeah. So to not
in the
go,
world.
So to not go, we have a political face to protect in the world. I think that's measurable, and that is certainly something to consider, but probably an error on the side of caution. Why don't we take a break right here? Let's pause for a break and pick up on the other side. Some of the issues and implications if the U.S. does respond. Okay, we'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back, everybody. Okay, Javier, we talked a little about the history of this topic with Syria throughout the Middle East, the geopolitical considerations. We talked about some of the implications if the U.S. does not act. Now, I'd like to get into what are some possibilities if the U.S. does act. What are the responses of some of these players that we've talked about in the region?
Well, we mentioned before that this seems to be a lose-lose situation for the U.S. if it intervenes or if it decides not to intervene. You're asking me what happens if the U.S. intervenes in the conflict in Syria, and what would be the response from some of the players in the region. I would say not only in the region. I think this would have implications worldwide. Here again is the ugly Americans intervening in a sovereign country in a local conflict. Why does the U.S. always want to get its hands in something that is happening in another country? So this is the first reaction that you're going to get from the traditional enemies of the U.S.
Right.
Everything that the U.S. does will be bad for some people or many people in the world. It's a fact, and that we have to live with that. So they're going to say, the imperialistic country does it again.
Yes.
And they're killing innocent people. They're killing civilians. They are destroying the property of a foreign nation. And why do they do that?
Yeah. What does Iran do here? What does Iran do?
Oh, it's threatening already, saying that if the U.S. intervenes, they're going to take measures, drastic measures. Will they attack Israel? Will they do probably arms of Al-Qaeda and some of the other terrorist organizations would probably take it against American installations somewhere in the world? I think we're going to see an escalate of terrorism because this is the way they do it. Yeah. This is the way they act.
Besides Israel, we have Jordan and Turkey, really the last remaining allies that work closely that don't have conflict.
And Egypt, so.
Yeah, it's in a transformation. We don't know where it's going, but it's in a transformation.
You have Pakistan on the other side also.
This is critical. It's critical, absolutely critical. And I agree with you. The U.S. could be in a no-win situation, whether they make the decision to go or not go. Let's focus on one other aspect of this. And you talked about it at the beginning. We talked about the military. We talked about the geopolitical. And what about the political element? Inside the United States politics, there's another battle going on there. And what are the implications here if we go, if we don't go?
Well, there's a very heated debate in the U.S. about Obama White House. They're criticizing that he doesn't make the right decisions. They say that he's not proactive enough, that he's more reactive, that he's too passive. I mean, that every president has many critics. And it's happening again with Obama White House, Absolutely. With Obama presidency. Maybe it has gone to some extremes because some of the decisions that the president has made. But whatever he does, he's going to be under severe attack from the opposition. Not only the Republicans, but even people within his own party are already saying, we are not going to vote for an intervention because my constituents don't want me to vote in favor of a U.S. American intervention in Syria.
Last numbers I
And
saw,
we
was
have
60%.
congressional elections, so they want to make sure they get reelected. So that's why I said at the beginning of this conversation that we also have local political implications of whatever happens in Syria.
Yes.
Or
no
whatever
question.
decision is made by the White House.
No question. I think even beyond the politics of the election coming in 2014, the longer term, the election for the presidency, the jockeying for the White House, the Democrat, Republican, what candidate will go forward. I think there are some other ones too, economic situations. How does this affect the oil? We have not yet made a decision in the U.S. to become independent. We still rely on oil. Prices, every time there's a crisis, the price goes up. It reduces the flow, even the fear of reducing the flow. So there's an economic impact here. I don't think America's ready for this.
Well, I mean, now that you mention oil, of course, in this conflict, there is the energy supply implication of what happens in Syria could escalate into something bigger in the whole peninsula and the Middle East. We have in Egypt a situation also that creates a kind of a uncertainty about what would happen with oil supply. Remember how much oil goes through Suez Canal.
Yes.
So I mean, you have strategically a concern of could oil supply be damaged by this conflict, localized conflict in Syria. So this is something that I'm sure they're thinking about. That it's not just a dictatorship that is hurting its own people. It's not only a religious conflict in a small country. No, it's what's happening in the whole Middle East and how that can affect oil supply to the Western world. So this is why I say it's a very complicated decision that the president has to make. And I would not like to be in his shoes.
No.
However, going back to the local political situation, I think his decision to bring this issue up to Congress side, I think was a very, very intelligent, politically astute decision on his side, because he says, "I wanted to intervene. I'm a powerful president, but then."
So he's actually deflecting some of this decision, the responsibility of this decision.
And if Congress says no, he can say, "I wanted to intervene, but Congress said no." So you cannot come back to me and say that I didn't make a decision on Syria because I did what the people wanted me to do, to bring it up to Congress that has to give me the power to intervene or not. So it's a way to pass the bucket onto Congress. It's a very, very astute decision.
Whichever side of this position, the American public finally makes their mind and hopefully influences yes or no. Get involved, don't get involved. I certainly hope it all doesn't hang on a political maneuvering within our country. I hope it's taken much more seriously than that. I'm afraid it might not be. But
well, we'll see, and I just hope and I pray that nobody goes overboard and as a reaction to a possible intervention of the U.S. in Syria. They have said that even if they intervene, it will not be on a major scale, on a large scale.
Yes.
But even if it's in a smaller scale, somebody can overreact, and Iran would love to overreact because they're just waiting for an excuse to really take some drastic actions in the region. And I hope that doesn't happen, because this could be a major international...
Major tensions are high, and it could be out of control quickly. Let's do this. We talked about a lot today. This is a very important issue, talked about by many, many beyond Congress, because it affects a lot of people in the United States. Let's summarize a little bit. What did we talk about? The religious aspects. Why don't you just summarize very quickly in 30 seconds if you can?
Well, it's a small country who is divided by religion. The majority is Muslim, Sunni. The country is run by by Sadat, who is a Shiite, and they are the minority in Syria, and they have been feuding all over the region for a long time. So that's a key root of the problem that we have now.
Okay, great. So it extends well beyond Syria, the conflict with the different religious factions. So there might be some motivations here that we need to analyze. What about the possibilities, again, the players that are involved? What do you see as key players and key options, possibilities that might take place?
Too many people are involved beyond the Syrian people. Too many nations, too many interests, political, commercial,
religious,
of course. So, I mean, this is not just a local issue. It has too many hands in the soup, and that could make it a very explosive situation. Everybody is looking to see how they can benefit from this conflict. That it's, in theory, it's a local conflict.
Okay, and finally, summarizing the U.S. politics. You think it's a game? Do you think we're playing a game?
I hope not. I hope this. They don't take a partisan position on that. They see the big picture of what could happen to the country as a whole, not only to the White House or to the Democratic Party, but this could have implications nationally to some extremes that we cannot even think about, and we should not be thinking about that alternative. This could complicate matters very badly for the U.S.
Speaking for the greatest majority of the population in the United States, I don't care what party affiliation, what side of this issue they are looking at and debating, I strongly believe we have a serious trust issue of the population, the people of the United States, having the confidence in the leadership that we have placed in our government that involved in making decisions.
In all of D.C.?
Yes, in general.
Right.
I think in general. There is a trust issue.
That's what the polls say.
Yes. They're not sure if they can trust the decision makers making the decision. That's a serious situation.
I'm afraid that because of that, and because of whatever action is made, that we will see more terrorist activity in the U.S. than we have seen before, because now they have a big excuse if the U.S. does intervene. And that's my concern when I said that this locally can escalate, is that we can give them justification,
perceived weakness,
and give them an incentive to carry out some major attack, which certainly we don't need and we don't deserve. And I hope that they're on the lookout on that, and the American people can realize that in times like this, intelligence is very important. And I know that we have this concern about the government, tapping into our conversations and so on. But these are very trying times, very difficult. And I'm not suggesting that they do that, but people will have to realize that they really have to continue carrying out very, very active intelligence.
It's almost choosing the best of the worst decisions.
Yes.
I don't know that there's a good one for the U.S. It's been a great conversation, Javier. I think an important one too. We both agree, and I think many people around the United States would agree with that. We will have to go probably to a part 2 at some point. This is moving quick.
Well, depending on the decision that the government, that the White House makes, of course there will be a part 2 and maybe even a part 3. I hope that part 3 is a happy one. But yes, I'm sure that we will come back to this issue to see what are the next steps and what results will they have.
Great. Thanks. I think it's a great place to end.
Well, nice talking to you.
I hope we've provided some perspective, some information, some insight for people to think about and making up their own mind. So until next time, thanks for tuning in, folks. We'll see you soon.
We'll see you soon, and thank you for listening to our show.
Well, Javier, we've come to the end of the show.
We certainly had a good time, and we hope our listeners did too.
Maybe along the way, someone even learned something.
And remember,
If you think something is
important stuff,
let us know and we will talk about it.
So, until next time, hasta la vista.